news stories to look at. Magento is an open source e-commerce site, and I've certainly heard of a lot of vulnerabilities about it. And apparently there's a new Magento vulnerability of some kind, although they don't say much about how it happens here. But this is a very common thing. People keep hacking Magento-based sites, so they add extra code to the page. I suppose perhaps they're just guessing the administrator password, but anyway, once they're in there, then they can put a backdoor and execute arbitrary PHP code on the machine. So that's pretty common. And of course, then they can put up code on the site that will steal credit card numbers from the shoppers and so on. So I see these warnings go by pretty often. This is pretty interesting. Endpoint detection and response tools, in particular, SentinelOne. SentinelOne makes some kind of monitoring security software. I haven't used it. I think it doesn't have a free version. But apparently, if you download the real installer and run the real installer, it will say, it will remove the old version before putting on the new version. And so that's an easy way to stop it, is to just run the installer until it removes the old version. And so you're not running any malware, you're running a legitimate installer. So this is pretty cute. And like I say, I read a whole lot of these stories where people don't use malware anymore. You avoid it. You just use legitimate system tools from Microsoft or elsewhere. And I've heard of ones where you bring in a deliberately vulnerable driver that's signed and trusted, and here you bring in an installer that's signed and trusted. So it's pretty clever. And I think SentinelOne will have to reconsider the steps their installer goes through. And to figure out exactly what's causing this and how to stop it. So there was, at this Trump North Korea style cabinet meeting where everybody had to praise him and say he was wonderful and tell him lies, which apparently he believes based on yesterday's interview, the journalists were able to take a picture of Mike Waltz's phone, and he was running this strange thing called Signal with a couple more letters, like TM Signal or something, a modified version of Signal made by an Israeli company, apparently violating the license, and apparently they've been pirating various other programs to add logging features. So you run Signal, it has the usual encrypted messages end to end, and then it sends an extra copy of it to some third party. And apparently that extra copy can go to a variety of cloud services, and apparently the Trump administration has chosen to use an insecure third service, because the first hacker that hacked in a few days ago said it only took me half an hour to get in, which means I don't even think it was SQL injection. Sounds like it was probably just an open, unencrypted data storage like an EC2 bucket or something. And now a second person has hacked it. And both of them have dumped out messages from the government showing that they're able to get in. So the company has shut down the app. At the moment, trying to deal with it. Apparently this is a really sleazy app. It didn't pass any reasonable tests, obviously, which is what you'd expect from the Trump administration, just like the first time. They're just sort of like a bunch of teenagers playing games. They don't bother to take security seriously or test anything or put any work in anything. Everything they do is just for show. They treat everything like it's a prop for a TV show, because that's all they're thinking about is how it looks on TV. And Trump chose these people for how they would look on TV, not for having any actual skill or training or sense of responsibility. So this is interesting. AI is often used in a high-stakes setting, like a medical setting, where it's reading a medical scan, and so they would like to make it not lie so much and not hallucinate so much, so they have a new way to do that. When it analyzes data, it looks apparently at the photographic data, and there's also some data it looks at that comes in with labels, and they're a little unclear about why this is, but there is some labeled data. So what they do is they remove some of the labeled data and then put it back in batches. So they create several predictions with slightly different inputs, and by comparing them, they're able to make it more accurate. This is all I thought. That's pretty much the only thing you can do. In my AI class is a project where you ask an AI about something that wasn't invented until a year after its training data, and it will just make up a lie. And if you ask it the same question again, it'll make up a different lie and a different lie. And that, as far as I know, is the only way to tell when it's lying, is to just get it to do the same question several times and look at the variation in the answers. And if it actually knows the answer, then the answers will all be similar. If it doesn't know the answer, they will just be wild guesses. And that looks like they're building that into the system here. The one thing they don't address, which occurred to me, is that this is going to make it even more expensive. You're going to have to run every question many times through the engine. And already AIs are so expensive, what customers pay isn't remotely covering the cost to them. So that's another issue. But anyway, hopefully it'll make it more reliable for predicting medical outcomes. How you catch a real person in lie, well, that's true. I think you're right. I think that's what cops do. They make you tell your story, they make you tell it again another day, and they ask you questions about it. Then they ask you other questions to see if you'll change your story. Yeah, that's a fair comparison. So RFK Jr. has said terrible things about autistic people. He clearly doesn't understand the symptoms of the real disease. He lies about the cause. He lies about the treatment. So I don't think he lies about treatment. He lies about treatment of measles. He's a complete lunatic, believing all sorts of false conspiracy theories, and he's deflecting the entire federal government medical system off to promote false medicine, quack medicine, and conspiracy theories. And in particular, he's demanded to make an autistic database. And the problem is, in general, the United States very much avoids making databases of a list of people who are sick with anything like HIV or anything else because there are a lot of Nazis in America. And when HIV came out, there were several southern states that just wanted to make a concentration camp and deport all the gay people to it. Or they'd love to deport all the people with HIV to it, or just execute them all. That's their kind of solution. And Elon Musk, the second president, and perhaps the first, depending on how you look at it, believes in eugenics. And his main expression of eugenics is paying a lot of women to bear his children because his genes are superior. But it's a very small step from there to where eugenics movements have gone in the past, where they decide to sterilize the undesirable people, which are always the races they're racist against. So certainly, if there was some autism database, then before long these guys would be sending them off to a concentration camp or executing them or sterilizing their parents because their parents are defective or something like that. And so people are resisting it, and rightly so. I remember when I was a kid, my parents told me, don't use a credit card. You don't want the government to have records of what you're doing. And I said, why? I'm not doing anything wrong. And they said, you'll find out, kid. And I found out. You don't want the government to have records because there really are, and always have been, a bunch of fascists and Nazis in the government. And every now and then they get their way. And their solution for everything is to round up undesirables and just get rid of them. And you could very easily fall into one of those undesirable categories for your religion or your race or your medical condition or your DNA or your political opinions or just anything. Nobody is safe in a fascist administration. They will sooner or later come after everybody. The whole point is to make everybody very, very afraid. And they're doing a pretty good job of it right now, although the resistance is gathering. Anyway, I'm going to stop this.